Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about the long essay question, or the LEQ. And you will write this style of essay in AP World History, AP US History, and AP European History. Let's go ahead and start looking at what this essay will look like to you. So the what of it. It's 15% of the exam. It takes 40 minutes of your time during your free response section, and it's based on a 6-point rubric. There's actually 3 different types of essay styles that you could be asked to write. So the first is a compare and contrast. The second is change in continuity over time. And the third is causation. And the way this will look is just a pretty standard 4-paragraph essay, which we'll talk more about later. One of the things about the long essay question that's often pretty challenging is that it's just going to be a question. You don't get any documents like you do on the DBQ, for example, or any kind of stimulus to really help you better understand what's being asked. So it really is just kind of based on things that you already know from things you should have learned in class. The name makes it sound like you're writing this really long response, but actually it's really not that long of an essay. I mean, in 40 minutes, how much can you really get down in the first place? You know what I mean? Some things that we do already know about the LEQ is that we know you'll have 3 different prompts to choose from. This is one of those sections where you actually get to select which question you're going to be answering. They do that because it is challenging to write about something with no external stimulus to help you. So there's 3 different time periods, which you can see here on our screen, that you'll be able to choose a prompt from. Which is nice because then you can really focus on the time period that you kind of know most about, which I think for most of my students is probably that 1900 to 2001 time period. Okay, so now we're going to go into what does each of these points that you could score on this rubric look like specifically. So this first one should look very familiar to you. So you get a point for writing a historically defensible claim as a thesis statement, just like you do on the DBQ, and you get a point for writing contextualization, just like on the DBQ. So remember, your contextualization needs to be about 50 to 100 years before the time period of the prompt, and it should be telling us, how did we specifically get to this point in time? What led to this event occurring? So your introduction paragraph for your LEQ will look exactly like what you would write on your DBQ, which I think is something really helpful that College Board does. Having those same skills in both essays is really great for you guys. The next way that you can get points on your LEQ is going to be a little bit different than what you would do in your typical DBQ. So the next way you can get points is through historical reasoning. So using historical reasoning, that they basically asked you to do in the prompt. So if your prompt is asking you to write a comparison essay, you're comparing 2 different things, and you do that to frame your argument, then you get this point. So as long as you're creating the style of argument that the prompt asks you to do, there's no reason that you should not get this point every time on your essay. Then you need to start providing examples that support the argument you're trying to make. So in a DBQ, this would look like you using the documents to provide your example. Because we don't have documents here, you're just going to be providing examples that, tie back to the points you're trying to make. So this might be, kind of listing out specific, like major eras that support your point. It could be listing out, major documents or people, big concepts that support what you're trying to say. This point is that kind of lower evidence bar, just like we see in the DBQ for using documents. This is the lower level reasoning right here. You're just providing me an example about what you're talking about. So you'd want to do this basically at least once or twice in each paragraph, major body paragraph that you're going to be writing for your LEQ. And then that kind of moves us on to how you get the second, more advanced argumentation point. You can get that second argumentation point by specifically explaining the examples that you're using. So you need to explain these pieces of evidence fully and substantially and really give a lot of detail as to how they are going to prove the point you're trying to make. So that's the more advanced level than just using it. The example, you're going to explain it really, really well. The other point that you can gain on this essay, the very last one we're going to talk about, is complexity. So just like in your DBQ, you can get a point for creating a historical complex argument that fully addresses the prompt and kind of adds this like level of complexity that goes beyond what the average student would be able to do. Just like the DBQ, College Board has given us some examples of what this should look like. I've listed out 5 of what I think are kind of the easiest ways to get complexity. So you can get it by explaining multiple themes or perspectives. So if that's like if you were asked to write about like political things in your essay, and then you did that, and then you also were to talk about like how those things affected economics as well, and like went on that kind of train of thought, that might get you the complexity point here. You can get the complexity point by explaining multiple causes or effects, multiple similarities, whatever it is the prompt asks you to do. They say by providing at least 4 of those examples of like how all of those things work, you can get the point that way. You can do it by explaining relevant and insightful connections within and across time periods or geographical areas. So having like a really solid example of how this also happened in this other place. And a lot of this stuff, everything that's on here, it needs to be like a really well-rounded idea and argument. It pretty much needs to be its own paragraph, and you're giving lots of time to that as well. College Board's made it very clear that they will not accept just a simple like phrase or sentence or casual reference to something for complexity. It has to be a really thought out, well-rounded argument that you've added. It's one of those things though, you either know it during that time or you don't know it, and it's okay. You don't need the complexity point to get a 5 overall on this AP exam. So just don't stress about it unless you just have this really great idea that comes to you right off the bat. So we're going to take a look at what does this look like in the actual essay. So I told you that it's a 4-paragraph essay. We're going to talk first about this first paragraph, which you guys already know how to write. It should be your contextualization in your thesis statement. And that's your whole intro paragraph. Make sure they are specific, just like you do in a DBQ. Then you're going to move on to your first body paragraph, which will be your second paragraph total, and you'll identify one really great example that you're going to talk about in that paragraph. Remember, identifying it and then like really explaining it and arguing it is how you get both of those evidence points. And I would encourage you to try to go for 2 instead of just 1. Get as much information as you can in there. And then you're going to do that same thing that you just did in the second paragraph and the third, where you give another specific example to support your point, and you're going to make sure that you argue it super well with as much detail as you can possibly manage in the time period. One thing to note is that, remember, if you're doing this really well, it's going to be kind of a lengthy paragraph, and it's okay if it's not well polished, because College Board knows that you're writing this in a very short amount of time. Your last paragraph, you're just going to sum up your main points, restate your thesis statement to make sure you get the point. And then if you haven't had the chance to do any sort of counter argument or complexity, this is where you go for that. So just spend your conclusion paragraph kind of rounding out the things that you would like to accomplish on the rest of this essay. And then for my classes specifically, this is how the grade breakdown is going to look when we write our LEQs in class. So you can see it's pretty scaffolded. You guys are going to do just fine. I think that you have a lot of the skills already that you need to be successful writing these LEQs just based on things that we've already done in class. Well, and that's it for our LEQ video for today. Thanks for watching, guys, and I know that you're going to do great on your first LEQ.